If our members please take their seats. Our guests find a seat in the gallery. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Will County Board for Thursday, June 21st, 2018. We will call this meeting to order. If everyone would please stand. County Board Member Mark Ferry will lead us in the Pledge of our Allegiance and then introduce the clergy for this morning.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'm honored to introduce Bishop Craig Purchase from the Mount Zion Full Gospel Tabernacle in Joliet. Bishop Purchase grew up in the East St. Louis area and received his education at Joliet Junior College, Moody Bible Institute, and Chicago Baptist Institute. Bishop Purchase has served Mount Zion for 18 years. He served as pastor at Calvary Baptist, Ottawa, and youth pastor at Shiloh Baptist in Lockport. He has been married to Deborah for 40 years, and they have 4 children and 13 grandchildren. Bishop Purchase.
God bless you, everyone. It's good to be here. Let us bow our heads. God our Father, we come in the name of Jesus. We thank you, Father, for this day. We thank you for just allowing us all to be here, and we thank you even for the rain that's out there today. We ask your blessings upon our county government and every leader, our county executive, and every person on the staff and cabinet, Lord. We ask your blessings on the work that they do, oh God, that so much toil and so much things they have to accomplish for the people of the community. Oh, Father, give them the mindset to work together, to stand together, oh God, to work in cooperation one with another. Father, we pray for those boys on the battlefield and girls on the battlefield around this world. Father, we ask you to remember those children that's been separated from their parents. Oh God, we just ask, thank you for all that you do and all that you're doing in our lives. And we ask you to just bless this meeting in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. God bless you.
Madam Clerk, would you please call a roll?
Sure. Mayor? Here. Brooks?
Yeah.
Ogala? Yes. Summers? Yes. Singer? Here. Moran? Present. Rice? Here. Harris? Here. Trenier? Here. Benefield? Here. Fritz? Present. Gould? Here. Militello? Here. Balich? Here. Frizzalone? Here. Winfrey? Here. Parker? Here. Staley Ferry? Here. Dollinger? Here. Markham? Here. Hart? Yes. Tuminello? Weigel, here. Ferry, here. Croditis, here. And Mustis. Here. Thank you.
26 present.
26 present. We have a quorum. Entertain a motion to place on file certificate of publication. Moved by Mr. Ferry, second by Ms. Trenier. Madam Clerk, call the roll,
Sure.
please.
Mayor, yes. Brooks, yes. Ogala, yes. Summers, Singer. Moran. Rice. Harris. Trainier. Benefield. Fritz. Gould. Militello. Balich. Frizzalone. Winfrey. Parker. Staley Ferry. Dollinger. Markham. Hart. Tumanello. Weigel. Ferry. Cordaitis. And Mustis.
26 affirmative.
Thank you.
Approval of minutes, I entertain a motion approving the minutes of the recess meeting of May 17, 2018. Moved by Mr. Summers, second by Mr. Moran. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Rice and second by Ms. Parker. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary, motion has carried. Madam Clerk, please acknowledge the elected officials and the media that's present this morning.
Sure. Auditor Duffy Blackburn, County Clerk Nancy Schultz Foots, County Executive Larry Walsh, Recorder of Deeds Karen Stuckel, our Sheriff Mike Kelly, State's Attorney James Glasgow. In the media, we have Farmers Weekly Review Nick Ryer, Herald News Alex Ortez, and then with Times Weekly, we have Megan Horsted. Welcome and good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Moving on, our first order of business is recognizing Plainfield High School track team state championship. County Board member Darren Benefield will recognize the school from his desk.
Good morning, Mr. Executive, and thank you.
Good morning, Darren.
I'd like to recognize the Plainfield North High School Tigers track team for winning 4 state titles and setting 2 new state records this year. The Plainfield North High School track team competed in the boys track state finals in Bloomington on May 27th. Specifically, there's a young man, Marcellus Moore, who's a sophomore, who became state champion in both the 100 and 200 meter. In addition to winning those, he actually set a new state meet record of 10.31 seconds in winning the 100 meter.
Jeez.
I think about that, think about my days and remember guys like him going right past me. The Tigers also won the 4x100 and also set a new state record of 41.29 seconds in the 4x100. So they set 2 new state records this year. The 4x100 relay team consisted of Brendan Hanneman, Brian Registi, Anthony Capizio, and again, Marcellus Moore. The Tigers were also victorious in the 4x200 meter relay, and those team members were consisted again of Brendan Hanneman, Brian Registe, Marcellus Moore, and Joe Steifen. There must be something in the water, Mr. Executive, in our area. Because in addition, the Plainfield North Tigers this year won the IHSA Class 4A state baseball title on June 9th at Joliet Route 66 Stadium. A little bit about that road was that the Tigers reached the finals when they were able to overcome a 7-0 deficit in the semifinals and advance to the finals with an 8-7 win. On June 9th, the Plainfield North baseball team won the school's first Class 4A baseball title with a 4-3 victory over Huntley. Bradley Miller supplied the only home run of the tournament with a solo shot to right center. We just wanted to recognize and acknowledge these accomplishments and congratulate the Plainfield North track and baseball teams for their outstanding accomplishments. Thank you, Mr. Executive.
Thank you, Darren. So, next, there will be a presentation to Children Advocacy Center. You have County Board members Herb Brooks and Mike Frizzalone will come to the podium. Lisa, you want to come now? Oh, Jim, get over there.
Let Jim talk first. Go ahead. No, you go ahead. I'll talk about it now. This certainly is a great day that we have a great sponsor in Citgo, and you know they are very generous for a lot of the efforts that we do in Will County, but this one in particular at the CAC this year, they're our major sponsor for the Men Who Cook event, which is going to be September 22nd, which I'm sure you'll all be at, but you have to read this on your desk because we're at a different location this year. The event is getting so large, we've moved it to the Chicago Speedway. So I think it's going to be a whole new style on the venue. We're going to have a lot of fun, but we can't do these kinds of things without great sponsors like Citgo, and you'll see their name on the top of the brochure this year. Chris, you want to?
Yeah, we're real proud to sponsor this event this year. We think it's going to be a great event out at the Speedway, and it's just getting bigger and bigger. We have lots of employees who like to donate their time and help, and we've got a few, I think, extra that are going to be cooking this year. So we are thrilled to be a part of this, and can't wait for September.
Fantastic.
And this check is for $10,000, the major sponsor. I will tell you, if you look in the book, though, there are many sponsorships left. So if you know businesses, individuals in your community that might want to do a sponsorship, all the information is in the brochure, so you can pass that around and make this the best event ever.
Murphy, do you need to bring your side up or Mark, you need? There you go.
Thanks, Chris. All resolutions approved at the May 17, 2018 County Board meeting have been signed by the county executive. Under new business, we are, according to my agenda, have a presentation by the Illinois Water Survey. I'm sorry, I don't have any information that I could introduce you, so.
That's all right, I can do myself.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you. So my name is Walt Kelly. I'm head of the Groundwater Science section at the Illinois State Water Survey, which is part of the Prairie Research Institute at the University of Illinois. And I gave this talk a few weeks ago to the Will County Economic Development Board, and Reagan Freitag was at that meeting, and she invited me to give this presentation, a slightly shortened version, to the Will County Board. So I'm going to talk a bit about what's going on with the water supply issue in this region. Namely that the sandstone aquifers are running out of water. So I don't know if you guys can see these slides. Okay. Thank you. So water people like to start off their talks with indicating how, a quote from Benjamin Franklin about how when the well is dry, we know the value of water. And I'm here to tell you that we actually have some wells that are starting to go dry. So hopefully this will work. Okay, so there's 3 points I'd like to make today. You're going to probably have to hit them. Okay, thanks, Colin. So first of all, the deep sandstone aquifers, which are an important water source in this region, being depleted unsustainably. Second, the effects are already being felt. Some public supply wells could go dry in as little as 5 years. And third, this is a regional problem requiring regional solutions, and communities and industries must collaborate to avoid a water supply crisis. So this map here shows where we're getting water from in the region. So the light blue color is where the Lake Michigan service area. And then on the outside in the collar counties, you can see these orange and yellow colors. And that's basically the groundwater communities. Orange being the deep sandstone aquifers and yellow being shallower aquifers. So about 90 million gallons per day of water being withdrawn from the sandstone aquifers. And our current estimates are that this is twice the amount that is sustainable. So to kind of give you a picture of what this looks like beneath us, since we can't really see what's going on, we've taken a kind of a geological slab just to cut it out and show you what these aquifers look like and where they are. So a few things I want to point out. So these blue layers are the sandstone aquifers. There's two main ones, a shallow one called the St. Peter, a deeper one called the Ironton-Galesville. And above them and between them are these gray units which are much more low permeability. And this is important for two reasons. First of all the rain that's falling today does not reach these aquifers because it cannot pass through these more impermeable layers. They end up in the shallow system, overland flow, or in the shallow groundwater, eventually going out in the rivers and ponds and lakes here. Also, Lake Michigan is not connected to these aquifers. It's not a source of water to these aquifers. The second thing is that these impermeable layers put these aquifers under a tremendous amount of pressure. So when these first wells were drilled in the 1860s, there was so much pressure in these aquifers that the water actually came to the surface, just flowed. You needed a pump to get that water out. Those called a flowing artesian well. So the water that's actually recharging these aquifers is originating up in the Rockford area, up in Wisconsin, where these units are much closer to the surface. So the problem now is that we've been bleeding off this pressure for the last 150 years because we've been using these aquifers quite a bit, and the water levels have been dropping to an extent where the shallow sandstone aquifer is now starting to go dry. And I also wanted to point out in Will County there's also a shallow bedrock aquifer called the Silurian dolomite, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but it's not the main focus of this talk. Okay, this is an animation. I'm not going to start it quite yet, but just want to kind of orient you to what we're going to be seeing here. So every 5 to 7 years since the 1950s, the Water Survey has gone out and taken water level measurements from hundreds of sandstone wells in the region, and we plot the data up so that we can get kind of a picture of what the water level surface looks like. So you can think of this, if any of you are hikers, you know what a topographic map is, which the contours indicate the elevation. Well, this is showing the amount of water that has been declining since the 1860s. So you can already see in 1959, when this animation starts, a couple of what are called cones of depression. So these are like the centers of the lowest level of the water in the aquifer. You can think of it like a bathtub drain where the water is kind of going into these drains where most of the pumping is occurring. And at this time, there were actually two cones of depression, one in the Elmhurst area and one down in the Joliet area. And so you can see already that that's a 400-foot contour level, so we're over 500 feet below the original water level in the 1950s. So I'm going to show, as this animation runs, can you run the animation, Colin? Oh, maybe not. Okay, so you can see as we go through the 60s, these cones of depression are growing in size, the water levels are going deeper and deeper, and this is the first kind of crisis we faced in this region from these deep sandstone aquifers. And then as a result of this, in the 1980s and 1990s, a lot of communities in DuPage County and Cook County switched off of the deep sandstone aquifer, and at this point you'll see up in the Elmhurst region kind of a recovery, which is the pressure kind of rebounding as a result of stopping pumping in that area. Now, this doesn't mean that there's a whole lot of water coming in. It just means that the pressure has come back up, and as soon as you put wells back up there, you'd go right back to where you came from. But you can see that down here in northern Will County and into Kendall County, the pumping is continued, unabated, and actually increased. You'll also see it kind of migrating a little bit to the west as Joliet kind of moves to the west as their well field moves towards where the growth is. So I don't know, you can't see that too well, but it's about 800 to 900 feet of water level drop down in this aquifer, which is one of the largest cones of depression in the world as far as we're aware of. So these measurements are made when the wells are turned off, what we call a static water level. It actually is worse when the pumps are on, and that's called a pumping level. And sometimes you can get 50 to up to 400 feet of drawdown when you just flip that pump on. And that has effects on surrounding wells, surrounding communities, and we have to consider this when we can account for a risk, because this is really what tells us how long a well is going to be functional. So it's a looming issue. It's actually already an issue. And this kind of cartoon shows what happens is as you deplete a confined sandstone aquifer. When you first start pumping, here's this red line represents where the water level would be in the well as you put it in. You're pumping a lot of water. You have maybe some domestic wells nearby. As you increase the pumping, the water levels drop. Your capacity of your well, capacity of your pump drops down. You'll have to increase the amount of power to actually remove the water. You also are exposing it to air, which can have effects on the water quality. And you may also cause your neighbors' wells to go dry. They'll have to start drilling deeper wells in order to get to the water. We can also develop, as part of our modeling and our data efforts, we can develop these risk maps that show where these concerns are most important. So I mentioned earlier there are two sandstone aquifers, the shallower one called the St. Peter and the deeper one called the Ironton-Galesville. The shallower one is mainly used by low-capacity wells, which would be domestic wells or small commercial and industrial facilities. And then on the right, the high-capacity wells, where are the most municipal and large industry wells, they actually go down to this deeper aquifer. But you can see we already have some severe risk zones, which means we're already seeing effects of the desaturation in a pretty wide area into several different counties and also down into the deeper aquifer. And I'm not going to go into the details of how we determine what the risk zones are, but they're based on kind of whether or not we just continue pumping the way we have been pumping or whether we put in new well fields, things like that. So there's a pretty large area of northeastern Illinois that are at risk of desaturating these aquifers. And you can see, though, it's centered around northern Will County. So that last measurement we did was in 2014. And since then, we've received water level data from some of the communities, especially Joliet's been very helpful in doing that. And so they've been giving us water level measurements from some of their production wells, and that's what these numbers represent, 8 of the major production wells in the deep sandstone aquifer. And they have been measuring in the last 3 to 4 years about 10 to 24 feet per year drawdown in these wells, which is about ½ an inch a day, which for groundwater is extremely fast. You can almost see these changes occurring. And as a result, we've calculated what kind of lifetime these wells have left in them. And if you look at what the recent trends indicate, it's anywhere from like 15 to 30 years that before these wells become no longer productive. However, if a new well field goes in a nearby community or within Joliet or in one of the industrial facilities, that time could be cut in half or more. So some wells, as low as 5 years, they would be no longer effective. So a single municipality industry can have impact far beyond its borders. So these particular communities, Joliet, Rockdale, Shanahan, and Shorewood, which were right kind of in the middle of that cone of depression, putting in even just one more well in there is going to have severe impacts on surrounding communities. And multiple wells in communities that are a little further outside would also have the same far-reaching impact. So as I mentioned, we've been getting good data, monthly water level data from Joliet and Aurora and some other communities, which have really helped us to evaluate the situation. And we're working with other groundwater communities in the county and the region to get similar sets of data. So there's some very important short-term planning needs that need to be going on in our estimation. Like I mentioned, the data reporting, we want to get this monthly Usually we're getting just annual data, but now we feel like we need to get more frequent data. Demand management strategies need to be going into effect, in our opinion. Things like ordinances about reducing outdoor watering. Not going to be a problem this summer, maybe. And this is, really need to start looking at developing an alternative water supply for the region. And fortunately, this is already going on. You may be aware that the city of Joliet recently awarded a contract to a consortium to look at, I think, 12 different possible options for getting a new water supply to Joliet, which includes the Kankakee River, Lake Michigan, and the Des Plaines River as the main options. But this will take a long time. To switch water sources is not an easy thing, as I'm sure you're probably aware. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be replaced. It's going to take probably close to a decade if things go well. And so there's possible water shortages that we're going to have to deal with in the next 5 to 15 years as a part of this. So I hope that I've convinced you that this is a regional problem. It's imperative that all the major stakeholders are part of these discussions so that we understand what needs to go on, and we need to continue studying the groundwater system so that we are able to efficiently and effectively use it as it's being phased out, and also as a possible backup supply depending on the new water resource that's used. So just a little plug for the water resource, the State Water Survey, which is part of the Prairie Research Institute. We've been involved in this kind of work as I was showing you for many decades. We have detailed computer models which we can use to look at all sorts of numerous demand scenarios. We have worked with other counties in the region on a cost-shared basis to look at water supplying issues, Kane County, McHenry, and Kendall County in recent years. We do have some resources that we can certainly apply to problems like this. So we also recommend that Will County undergo this water supply planning effort that these other counties and there's additional scientific research that we feel needs to be done, and that the Water Survey is probably the best position to do that kind of work. So obviously we need more work in the sandstone, but I also mentioned that Silurian aquifer, which is a very important aquifer, especially in the eastern part of Will County. That hasn't been studied in quite some time, and that needs some updated work. We need to look more at the Kankakee River, because that's right now the leading candidate for the replacement for the deep sandstone aquifers. So I've passed out some draft proposals to do this kind of work. I just realized I put the wrong date on there. It's 2018, not 2017. And it also says DAT is my watermark because my smart printer decided only to print every other letter. So it's DAT instead of draft. So that's that proposal, I guess. So anyway, there's a list in some detail the kind of work that we think needs to be done. So with that, I think my last slide is just my first slide, just showing you what the main points that I wanted to get from you. And if there's time, I guess I can take questions.
Any questions? Jim Glasgow.
You mentioned the impermeable layers and that the rain isn't getting into the aquifers. In the 1800s, were those impermeable layers not there?
No, they've been there for a long time. So the water in that aquifer has come from a long way away. It's thousands of years old, even tens of thousands of years old, but that's why when we're consuming, it's not being replaced. Now, the hydrogeology has changed significantly because we've put in thousands of wells, so there is water that does leak from overlying sources, but not nearly enough to replace the water that we're taking out.
Well, the rainwater then, is there any way to collect that? I mean, some of our rainstorms seem like they generate quite a bit of water.
Yeah. The problem with that is we can't get enough water back into that aquifer to probably make a difference. There are all sorts of chemical issues, too, about putting water that's been exposed to air down into an aquifer where it's just not exposed to air at all. So that is one of the possibilities I think that Joliet is looking at. It's called managed aquifer recharge, collecting water and injecting it back into the aquifer. But our initial model run suggests it's probably going to be too expensive to do something like that.
Ms. Traynor.
Yeah, we used to use cisterns in this country for water, and that was just rainwater that was collected and put in a container. In fact, I think there's a cistern at the Joliet prison.
Sure, that's possible for small supplies of water, but we're talking about, millions of gallons per day that we need to replace. So, I mean, a
just think
typical.
about that deep tunnel project. Where does all that water go?
So that water ends up going to the Metropolitan Waste Water Reclamation District. It's
So it
treated.
doesn't get treated and
And
used?
sent down the river, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Ferry?
The wells drawing down the aquifer, those would be like deep wells?
Yeah.
Municipal?
Yeah, 600 to 1,000 feet deep, yeah.
Okay.
And industrial wells too. There's a large industrial facilities, as you know, in the south of Joliet, which use groundwater for the most part.
Okay.
Mr. Benefield?
On one of your slides, you identified the specific wells, and you were estimating the lifespan on those wells. I was just trying to quickly, on number 18 there, it looks like you're estimating 5 years.
That's with a new well field that hasn't gone in. So the Hashard bar is if current trends continue. We would expect that well to be effective for 15 more years. However, if new wells went in nearby, like at an industrial or a municipal source, that could be cut in half or more because everything that, it's all related. This whole aquifer is connected to all these wells. So what your neighbor does is going to affect what happens to you.
Okay. So I guess my question is that, and this is new to me, is not this aquifer issue, but, so are there specific communities that you can identify that are drawing off of that well? And what's been done to notify those communities and the public that, hey, listen, we're predicting in 5 years this well's not going to work?
Well, we've certainly talked to Joliet about it. They know all about it. But it's like any well that goes in is going to affect all the wells in the region. So it's not like a one-to-one type of thing. So we've been for the past year or year and a half, we've been coming up to and talk to a lot of different groups about these issues, trying to get people to start taking some action. And Joliet certainly started to take action at this time.
So my question specifically is that, are there specific communities drawing off of well 18 that you can identify and say, we've got a problem here, how can we start to reroute them to get onto different wells?
So well 18 is a Joliet well.
Okay.
So Joliet is taking the water out of that well.
Okay.
So what that red bar indicates is if, for example, a new series of wells went in and, say, Shorewood. I can't remember an exact model scenario, Shorewood or Romeoville or one of those. That well will suddenly become less effective because you're drawing down the water table overall. And that particular well is near the center of the Kona Depression, so it's extremely vulnerable to any perturbations in the system.
Okay, and then I have a second question where you had showed at one of the slides regarding the deep wells are obviously into the aquifer, but the residential wells are much more shallow.
Correct.
Are you receiving any reports of any residential wells drying up and?
Yes, so
and
we've had
specific
reports in
communities?
Shorewood and I believe in Shanahan, indicating that some of these shallower wells, either they have to drop the pump or they have to drill deeper because the water levels have been dropping in that, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Mustis?
You mentioned, well, first, there's a number of different aquifers in Will County. You're basically talking today about the sands.
Correct, sandstone.
Aquifer, but there are other aquifers.
Correct.
I think there's at least two that I think I'm aware of. Of course, aquifers, as you mentioned, go across, they don't know municipal or county boundaries. You mentioned northern Will County quite a bit, though, and much of northern Will County is on lake water.
Correct.
I guess when you're giving us an analysis of groundwater, you're just giving us a snapshot of just one aquifer. You did mention also eastern Will County.
Correct.
Part of which is on a different
That's correct.
aquifer. So for us to get a really clear picture, we need to know where the problems really lie. When you talk about northern Will County, you also mentioned we're not the only county on on this aquifer.
That's correct.
You know, I think much of our communities, much of our population is on Lake Michigan water in northern Will County. So I'm just saying that, you know, it would be nice to see us get a little further analysis of the entire county when it comes to where the problems lie, just not the sands. Obviously, the biggest, the community with the most urgent need is Joliet, and they're addressing that. Hopefully, they'll look for an alternative or decide on an alternative source of water. So, you know, maybe at some point in time you can, you go regularly to our Stormwater Management Committee. That's where you generally report to in our land, which is part of our, which is supported by our land use department. So, you know, I'd like to see maybe a picture, more complete picture of Will County, you know, all the aquifers and how they're being affected. Maybe we can do that at a later date at
Yeah, I mean, that's part of why we recommend water supply planning for the entire county. That's the draft proposal that I sent around. You're absolutely right, that Silurian dolomite's a very important aquifer, especially in the eastern part of the county. Unfortunately, in the Joliet region, there's not much water in that aquifer. It's not a very good aquifer at that point. And it doesn't provide enough water for that region. But
so I would say continue to work with the land use department and stormwater management committee. And
I mean, we'll do what we can. You know, we are responsible for the entire state, so we don't really have. I mean, this to us is the biggest problem in the state. So we're putting as many resources as we can in this situation, but we're not a large group.
Didn't we have I'm going to ask this of land use, perhaps they can recall, there was a grant for the Thorn Creek aquifer a number of years ago. Was that for the aquifer? Was that for stormwater? I thought it was for the aquifer water resources. There was a federal grant. I'm just wondering, are you familiar with any of that?
I'm not.
No, okay, all right. Anyways, that's, I just wanted to point out that, you know, this is just one portion of the county. And I'd be more interested in getting a more complete picture of all of Will County. So that's all. Thank you.
Ms. Daly Ferry?
Yeah, just a quick question. With Joliet needing to come off the aquifer or, you know, coming off the aquifer for a different source, how will it impact or affect the rest of the area then? Is there a...
So we have done model simulations. So if Joliet gets off the aquifer, that obviously would really help. They use, I think, around 20 million gallons a day, somewhere in that ballpark. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, that water is really old. You know, it's not being recharged very quickly. So it increases the amount of time that the industries and other communities would have on that aquifer, but it does not solve the problem. The whole region is really going to have to deal with this problem, not just the city of Joliet. So okay. I think they're looking, and I may be wrong on this, but they're looking at their own situation, but I think they're thinking about possibly selling to other communities. And I don't know about what they're talking to industries or not. I think they're talking about some wastewater, treated wastewater going to some of the industries there as cooling water. But yeah, it's like an octopus. There's all sorts of arms out there, stuff going on.
Thank you.
Any, Mr. Ferry?
Yeah, one more question. From me, anyway. And that is, how many aquifers come into Will County, or do we have access to tap into?
So
there's one real giant one, isn't there?
There's the deep sandstone aquifer, which is really mainly used in the kind of the northern and western part of the county. It's not really used further east because the water quality really drops off. And there's fewer people in these too, obviously. But they use the Silurian dolomite, which is a much shallower bedrock aquifer, but it doesn't have the capacity that these sandstones have. Like, you can't get as much water out of them. And then above that, there are also some glacial deposits, some sands that were left over from the glaciers. And those are kind of hit and miss, but they cover most of the county to some degree. But again, you can get a small community municipal water supply out of those, but nothing like on the order of a Joliet or industrial needs. So I mean, there is water here. Sometimes it's not in the right place where we need it. But we have options to switch off the deep aquifer, which is good.
Any last questions? Well, thank you very, very much. Very informative.
Yeah, and if anybody didn't get a copy of the proposal, let me know. I have. Yeah. Thank you.
First up, Land Use and Development Committee, Mr. Weigel, Chairman.
Our first item is the public hearing for land use cases. I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Moved by Mr. Weigel, second by Mr. Balich. Would you please call the roll, Nancy?
Sure. Mayor? Brooks? Ogala? Summers? Singer? Moran? Rice? Harris? Trainier? Benefield? Fritz? Gould? Militello? Balich? Frizzlone? Winfrey? Parker? Staley Ferry? Dollinger? Markham? Hart? Tumanello? Weigel?
Yes.
Ferry? Colatis? And Mustis. Thank you.
26 affirmative.
26 affirmative. We are in public hearing. We have 5 cases to be heard today. Case ZC 17-054, ZC-17-056, ZC 18-009, ZC 18-016, ZC -18-026, and case ZC 17 dash, oh, that was the yeah, that's 5. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to address the board on any of these cases? Anyone from the public wishes to have the floor on any of these cases? Anybody from the public? Mr. Weigel?
Make a motion to close public hearing.
Moved by Mr. Weigel, seconded by Mr. Frizzalone. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Sure. Mayor? Brooks? Ogala? Summers? Singer? Moran? Rice? Harris? Trainier? Benefield? Fritz? Gould? Militello? Balich? Frizzalone? Winfrey? Parker? Staley Ferry? Dollinger? Markham? Hart? Tumanello? Weigel?
Yes.
Ferry? Colatis? And Mustis. Thank you.
26 affirmative.
The public hearing has been closed. Continue, Mr. Weigel.
Our first case is a map amendment from C2 to R5. This is at 1427 East Cass Street in Joliet. Committee recommends approval, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Weigel, second by Ms. Winfrey. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Markin, second by Ms. Summers. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary motion is carried.
Next case is map amendment from C2 to R5. This is at 1429 East Cass Street in Joliet. Committee recommends approval, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Weigel, second by Ms. Winfrey. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Parker, second by Ms. Militello. All in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary motion is carried.
Our third case is a special use permit for a solar farm in Manhattan. At our committee, we had 3 solar farms. We had approved this one and 2 others. Beyond this, we decided to table because there's new information being developed in Springfield and legislation which they're working on, and we'd like to incorporate that into our special use permit. So I'm making a motion to return this special use permit for the solar farm back to our land use committee. I'll make that motion.
Moved by Mr. Weigel to return back to committee, this case. Second by Ms. Summers. Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary, motion has carried.
Our fourth case is a special use permit for keeping of more than 6 companion animals, boarding and care. This is a rescue resident in Elwood. They live in a large parcel, and we've limited to a maximum of 15 dogs and cats. Committee recommends approval, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Weigel, seconded by Ms. Parker. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Harris, second by Mr. Moran. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary, motion has carried.
Next case is a special use permit for keeping of horses. This is in Crete Township on a large parcel residence. Committee recommends approval, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Weigel, second by Ms. Ogala. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Summers, seconded by Ms. Winfrey. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary, motion has carried.
That concludes my report. Our next meeting will be on July 10th at 10:30 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weigel. Next up, Finance Committee, Mr. Frizzalone, Chairman.
We live? Good morning, Will County.
Good morning, Michael.
First up, we have some reports. The report from the Illinois Department of Revenue showing sales tax remitted to Will County for the month of March 2018 to be $1,401,859.87, and the RTA tax received is $1,675,168.58, for a total of $3,077,028.45. And we also have the monthly treasurer report dated April 30th from our Will County Treasurer Steve Weber. And I'd like to make a motion to put both of those on file.
Moved by Mr. Frizzalone, second by Ms. Dollinger. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
We have 18-151, and this is committing funds for the University of Illinois Cooperative Extension, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Frizzalone, second by Ms. Winfrey. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Mayor, second by Mr. Brooks. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion is carried.
We have 18-152, appropriating grant funds in the coroner's budget, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Frizzalone, second by Mr. Gould. Any question? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Trainier, second by Ms. Rice. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
And we have 18-153, designating Huntington National Bank as a county depository.
Moved by Mr. Frizzalone, second by Mr. Mayor. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Dollinger, second by Mr. Tumanello. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary, motion has carried.
That's all the business I have this month, and due to the holiday, our next meeting will be August 7th at 10 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Next up, Public Works and Transportation. Mr. Gould, Chairman.
Morning, Mr. Executive and
Morning,
fellow
Don.
board members. Start with Resolution 18-154, adopting the Will County Transportation Improvement Program for fiscal years 2019 through 2024. I move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Mr. Moran. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Summers, second by Mr. Harris. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion is carried.
Resolution 18-155, amending Will County Division of Transportation oversized overweight truck permit procedures. I move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Mr. Benefield. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Fritz, second by Ms. Melatello. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion is carried.
Resolution 18-156, confirming award of contract to deconstruction led on May 16th, 2018. Joliet Road District Overlay, County Board District 8. I move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Ms. Winfrey. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Summers, second by Mr. Ferry. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Resolution 18-157, confirming an award of contract to P.T. Farrell Construction led on May 16, 2018, New Lenox Road District Overlay, County Board District 7, 8, and 12. I move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Mr. Tumanello. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Ballich, second by Ms. Hart. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Resolution 18-158, authorizing approval of the establishment of altered speed zone 554, County Board District 12. I move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Mr. Ballich. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Markin, second by Mr. Ferry. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion is carried.
Resolution 18-159, authorizing approval of the establishment of altered speed zone 555, County Board District 12. I move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Miss Ogala. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Winfrey, second by Ms. Staley Ferry. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion is carried.
Resolution 18-160, authorizing approval of the establishment of altered speed zone 556, County Board District 12. I move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Ms. Dollinger. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Moran, second by Ms. Rice. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion is carried.
Resolution 18-161, a resolution granting a variance for the Noel Park Community Center water main under Mills Road, County Board District 8. I move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Ms. Winfrey. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Brooks, second by Ms. Staley Ferry. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Resolution 18-162, authorizing approval of professional services agreement for right-of-way acquisition services with Hampton, Lenzini, and Renwick for several parcels of property along Laraway Road from Cedar Road to Stonebridge Drive in County Board District 12. I move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Mr. Mayor. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Moran, second by Mr. Markham. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Resolution 18-163, authorizing the approval of MFT funds for right-of-way acquisition services by the county under the Illinois Highway Code for several parcels of property along Laraway Road from Cedar Road to Stonebridge Drive in County Board District 12.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Mr. Tumanello. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Ogala, second by Mr. Benefield. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion is carried.
Resolution 18-164, authorizing approval of professional services agreement for right-of-way acquisition services with Swanson and Brown for several parcels of property along Laraway Road from Cedar Road to Stonebridge Drive, County Board District 12. I move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Ms. Hart. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Trainier, second by Mr. Ferry. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Resolution 18-165, authorizing the approval of MFT funds for right-of-way acquisition services by the county under the Illinois Highway Code for several parcels of property along Laraway Road from Cedar Road to Stonebridge Drive in County Board District 12. I move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Mr. Tumanello. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Parker, second by Ms. Fritz. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Resolution 18-166, authorizing approval of professional services agreement for right-of-way acquisition services with Mathewson Right-of-Way Company for several parcels of property along Briggs Street from the I-80 westbound ramps to Washington Street in County Board District 8. I move for
Moved by
approval.
Mr. Gould, second by Ms. Winfrey. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Brooks, second by Ms. Staley Ferry. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Resolution 18-167, authorizing the approval of MFT funds for right-of-way acquisition services by the county under the Illinois Highway Code for several parcels of property along Briggs Street from I-80 westbound ramps to Washington Street, County Board District 8. Move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Ms. Winfrey. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Summers, second by Mr. Harris. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Resolution 18-168, authorizing the Will County State's Attorney's Office to proceed with condemnation cases regarding the county's improvements at the intersection of Francis Road and Parker Road, County Board District 12. Move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Mr. Tillman. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Trenier, second by Ms. Rice. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Resolution 18-169, authorizing the appropriation of MFT funds for property acquisition by the county under the Illinois Highway Code for several parcels of property at the intersection of Francis Road and Parker Road, County Board District 12. I move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Mr. Tumanello. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Fritz, second by Ms. Ogala. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Resolution 18-170, authorizing approval of professional services agreement for supplemental design engineering services agreement with Willett Hoffman and Associates for roadway and appurtenant work on Cedar Road over Spring Creek, County Board District 7.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Ms. Melatello. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Ferry, second by Ms. Hart. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Resolution 18-171, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between the County of Will and the Village of New Lenox for future permitting requirements on Laraway Road, County Board District 12.
Moved by Mr. Gould, second by Mr. Tumanello. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
The committee will not meet in July due to the July 4th holiday, so all our July business will go to the Executive Committee. And the August business will be here on August 7th at 9 o'clock.
Thank you, Don. Thank you. Next up, Judicial Committee. Mr. Benefield, Chairman.
Good morning again, Mr. Executive.
Good morning, Darren.
Thank you, Chairman Gould, for that lengthy report. I'm going to try to keep things moving here. We've got one item on our committee today, and that's an award bid for food services at River Valley Juvenile Center, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Benefield, second by Mr. Mayor. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Dollinger, second by Ms. Melatello. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
We will, our Judicial Committee will be rolled into the Executive Committee for the month of July, and our next scheduled meeting will be for August 7th, 2018 at 9 a.m. in the County Boardroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Next up, Public Health and Safety Committee, Ms. Ogala, Chairperson.
Good morning, County Executive.
Good morning, Judy.
I don't have anything on on my agenda today that we will be voting on, but I did want to report on a couple of things. First, at our committee meeting this month, we had a great presentation of the YES program, and that was given to us by Assistant Principal Joe Wooten and Michelle Zambrano from our Will County Behavioral Health Team. The YES program is in place at both Joliet Central and Joliet West. It is a comprehensive approach in helping teens who are struggling with issues. The team stays with the teens throughout high school and into college. The YES program began in 2005, and I just want to thank these ladies for their leadership, and also Sue Olenek from our health department for making sure that this program stays in place, because it serves a lot of students in this area, and I think it's a great example of what teamwork can do to help these kids when they need the help most. I'd also like to give a little report from Kathleen Burke, who's our Director of Substance Use Issues. I'd like to make you aware of three important things that she reported to us. One is the final report of the State of Illinois Opioid Action Plan, otherwise called SOAP, implementation report was released on May 31st. Our program is in alignment with the SOAP plan. Next, she had some good news to report. The 1115 waiver was finally approved. The 1115 waiver is a contract between the federal and state government that waives federal Medicaid requirements and gives the state government approval to experiment, pilot, or demonstrate projects. The purpose of these demonstrations is to evaluate policy approaches such as providing services that are not typically covered by Medicaid or creating innovative service delivery systems that improve care, increase efficiency, and reduce costs. The most significant pilots that are being planned is a big change to the residential and inpatient treatment program for individuals who have substance use disorders. The cap previously had been 16 beds, and that now has been raised, so that really helps them to be able to bring additional people in who need services. Another is the clinically managed withdrawal management services pilot, the SUD case management pilot, peer recovery support services pilot, and the crisis intervention pilot. And in closing, it's on a sad note because during the Memorial Day weekend, we lost 5 people due to overdose deaths from the New Lenox, Lockport, Homer Glen communities. Fentanyl is to blame for these deaths, and most of these were due to relapses after a long time in recovery. So it's sad that somebody who struggles with this still, after being in recovery for a long time, still can lose their life to this sad thing. As so far through June 11th of this year, we've had 36 deaths related to fentanyl. So that is quite intense, and I'm glad that we continue working towards that. But lastly, on a very exciting note, on behalf of the Executive Director of Sunny Hill Nursing Home, Becky Halderson, I'd like to invite everyone to the 50th anniversary celebration this Saturday at Sunny Hill Nursing Home, and that's from noon till 4. So they're going to have a big party, a big tent, food, games, everything. So if you have time and you can stop by and celebrate with the folks at Sunny Hill, that would be great. Again, I would also like to tell everyone that we are not meeting in July due to the 4th of July holiday. All our reports will be given to the Executive Committee, and our next meeting will be held Thursday, August 2nd at 9 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Next up, Legislative and Policy Committee. Ms. Hart, Chairperson.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Thank
Susanna.
you. I have one resolution, 18-173, in support of NACO's legislative priorities for the FAA reauthorization or extension, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Hart, second by Mr. Moran. Any discussion? Any discussion? Previous roll by Ms. Malatello and second by Ms. Parker. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary, motion has carried.
Thank you. We had Brent Hassert, one of our consultants, come in from Springfield and just did a recap on what was the end with the budget. Yay, we have one. It was a very smooth year, first one in a few years. And just going over some of our bills and the priorities in our agenda. So we will, again, like setting the tone for July, not have a meeting. If we have anything, that we will go ahead and bring it up in front of executive. And so our next meeting will be Tuesday, August 14th.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Next up, Capital Improvements Committee, Mr. Tuminello, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Executive. Good morning, everybody. The first thing on the agenda is the Will County Capital Improvement Summary, dated June 13th. That's in your packet. So if you would like to get an update on where we are with all the capital improvements projects, it's some fun reading. Next thing on the agenda is 18-174, authorizing the Will County Executive to execute a contract amendment with Leopardo Companies for the pre-construction phase services required for the new Will County Health Department building. And I so move.
Moved by Mr. Tuminello. Did you want a second, Ms. Dollinger? Second by Ms. Dollinger. Any discussion? Any discussion? Previous roll by Mr. Mayor, second by Ms. Winfrey. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, Tuesday of this week coming up on June 26th, it is the dedication for the Public Safety Complex at 11 a.m. It's very exciting. We're going to be able to cut that ribbon, and as you could see, Leopardo and DLR have finished up their work out there. The project is coming along nicely, so hope to see everybody out there. Hopefully we get some good weather. Last but not least, I wish I was able to give everybody the July month off due to the holiday, but unfortunately we still have a tremendous amount of work to do over there in the Capital Improvements Committee. So we will be meeting on July 10th. It's listed as 17th in the packet, but at our last meeting on Tuesday, we did change it to July 10th, and time will be to be determined. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Next up, Executive Committee, Mr. Mustis, Chairman.
Good morning, Mr. Executive.
Good morning, Jim.
Morning, County Board. My first item is 18176, authorizing, 175, authorizing county executive to negotiate an agreement for Prairie View landfill solar development, and I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Mr. Mayor. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Winfrey, second by Mr. Harris. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, that motion has carried.
Next, I have 18176, authorizing a contract with Ann Schneider and Associates. I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Ms. Winfrey. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Parker, second by Ms. Dollinger. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Next up, 18177, IDOT statewide planning and research grant application. I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Ms. Summers. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Moran, second by Mr. Gould. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Next, I have 18178, a resolution providing for the discharge of the indentures relating to the Public Building Commission, billing revenue, refunding bonds for the Juvenile Justice Center, the termination of the lease agreement, the transfer of certain land to Will County, and the execution of related documents, and I will move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Mr. Moran. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Harris, second by Mr. Markham. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary, motion has carried.
You know, it's not too often that a county board member actually gets their own resolution, but you know, Denise Winfrey is stepping it up for this county, for the National Association of Counties. She's being considered for a board position, which is, I don't believe we've never had anyone on the board except for maybe Mike Paceris for the Forest Reserve. So this is really, for her to be considered as quite an honor, and she needs our support. NACO needs to know that she has our support. So 18179, supporting Denise Winfrey for a NACO board seat. I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Mr. Brooks. Any discussion?
Previous roll.
In this, previous roll by Mr. Mayor, second by Ms. Winfrey, or Ms. Trainier. All in favor?
You're not going to vote for yourself?
She'll vote for herself, yeah.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that motion has carried.
Okay, now they better give it to you, Denise, or we're gonna have to have a discussion with them down there. Okay, next we have 18180, awarding bid for Fairmont Central drainage improvements, and I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Ms. Winfrey. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Parker, second by Ms. Staley Ferry. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary, motion has carried.
Have 18181, awarding bid for sale of surplus vehicles, and I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Ms. Rice. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Harris, second by Ms. Summers. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Next, you have 18182, authorizing a multi-year real estate assessment agreement with ExxonMobil. I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Mr. Gould. Any question? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Melatello and seconded by Ms. Dollinger. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Next one, 18183, I'd like to mention, this will, is an effort to bring the State Association of Counties into, like, under one umbrella. I'd like to thank Suzanne Hart. She's done a lot of work throughout the state and through our region for trying to unify our associations so we have a single voice. So thank you, Suzanne. So 18181, 1883. Illinois State Association of Counties membership, I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Ms. Hart. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll, Mr. Mayor, second by Ms. Dollinger. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Next, I have 18184, adoption of wage compression tentative agreements with ASME Local 1028, subcommittee for executive branch, and I will move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Ms. Winfrey. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Harris, second by Ms. Trainier. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary, motion is carried.
18185, ascertaining the 2018 prevailing wage rates, I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Ms. Summers. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Moran, second by Ms. Dollinger. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has
18186, replacement hire for land use department development analyst 1, I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Mr. Brooks. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Trainier, second by Mr. Ferry. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
18187, replacement hire for ICT department land infrastructure tech, I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Mr. Brooks. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Summers, second by Ms. Ogala. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion is aye. Passed.
18188, replacement hire for supervisor assessments office, I'll move
Moved by
for
Mr.
approval.
Mustis, second by Ms. Winfrey. Any question? Any questions? Previous roll call by Mr. Markham, second by Mr. Moran. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion is carried.
18189, replacement hire for the emergency management agency, I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Mr. Gould. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Tumanello, second by Ms. Fritz. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion is carried.
18190, replacement hires for Sunny Hill food and beverage service manager, I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Mr. Brooks. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Ms. Winfrey, second by Ms. Dollinger. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
18191, replacement hire for the county executive maintenance department,
Moved
I'll
by
move for approval.
Mr. Mustis, second by Ms. Summers. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Gould, second by Ms. Melatello. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Our next meeting will be July 12th at 10 a.m. Next, I have the appointments of the county executive. I'll move for approval.
Moved by Mr. Mustis, second by Mr. Brooks. Any questions? Any questions? Previous roll by Mr. Markham, second by Ms. Ogala. So all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion has carried.
Mr. Executive, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mustis. Next up is public comment. Anyone from the public that would like to address this board? Anyone from the public? I don't care. Yes, 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 sir. Come on down. Come on down. No, go to the podium, please.
Good morning. I would like to start out by pointing out there are over 2.2 million void card holders within the state of Illinois and 300,000 concealed carry license holders. One of them stands before you as we speak. Time and time again, the 100th General Assembly of the state of Illinois have passed numerous laws infringing on the Second Amendment rights of their constituents. These laws will do absolutely nothing to curb violence within any communities. Numerous county boards have passed resolutions opposing these laws, in that they violate the U.S. Constitution, and that if the state of Illinois continues to infringe on Second Amendment rights within the county, they would then become a sanctuary county for all firearms unconstitutionally prohibited by the state government. These counties would prohibit its employees from enforcing these unconstitutional actions by the state. I asked the Will County Board to do the same. Will County was one of the first counties to pass resolutions in favor of concealed carry throughout the state of Illinois, shortly after concealed carry was passed. The right of the people to keep and bear arms for the defense of life, liberty, and property should be regarded as an inalienable right by the people of Will County. These people derive economic benefit from all safe forms of shooting, including recreation and hunting, conducted within the state. Legislation at the state, county, and local level will force small businesses lawfully owned and operated to close their doors and create undue burdens and price increases on persons lawfully purchasing firearms, which would put a negative impact on all local communities through job loss and sales tax loss. I also would like to remind that those elected to public office took an oath to serve and protect the Constitution of the United States and the state of Illinois. And I would like to close with the fact that I am not, and it's not just me too, there's a lot of us that are getting tired of the fact that we're being used as scapegoats for violence for people that have no regard for laws, period. What I did choose to use to defend my family should not be dictated, because of the fact that I choose to follow these laws, I'm the one that's getting in trouble. There was a person out in California to where he chose to follow the law and tried to register his firearms within the state of California, and he was then thrown in jail, charged with multiple felonies. That will then become what's going to happen in the state of Illinois if this continues to happen. And I would highly ask the board to do the same as multiple counties within the state of Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you state your name, please?
My name is John Sheskier.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public wish to speak before this board? Anyone else? Anyone else wish to speak before the board? Last call. Anyone? Okie dokie. Next up, comments by county board members. And Ms. Ogala.
Thank you. As chair of the Ad hoc IT committee, I just wanted to let everyone know that we recently, the group who is looking at the court management services systems got together after reading 4 very lengthy manuals from our vendors that put in bids. We selected to look at 3 different vendors for our court system. And the first one will begin on July 17th. They're going to be 3-day events, so if you guys want to come hang out for 3 days here, we'll be in the county board meeting room, the committee room. We will be interviewing TriBridge, Carpel Solutions, and Equivant. Each one of these provides different types of options, and I think it's very exciting. Our first day will be the state's attorney. Our second day will be the state's attorney and public defender. Our third day will be public defender and probation, if the option is available. So I know that this is an absolutely wonderful time that we're doing this, since we're building the new courthouse. And I know that the state's attorney is very excited about finding something that gives us a solution for many of the different processes they have to go through at the courthouse. And it will eliminate much of the paperwork that they have to drag from building to building to building, and a lot of this will also offer them the opportunity to look things up at home. They could look at their iPad, they could look at their cell phone and access. So pretty excited about that. I just wanted to let everyone to know that we are moving forward on this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Ms. Daly Ferry.
I just wanted to make a quick comment and thank everyone for your continued support for the drainage project in Fairmont. These projects are important to the community there and to the residents. So there's still a lot of work to do out in that area, but I'm grateful for your continued support for that community. So thank you.
Any other county board members wish to have the floor? Then we go on to our majority leader, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Executive. As we bring June to a close here for the county main business, and it's a beautiful rainy day outside, I do want to thank all our sponsors for the Will County Children's Center. That was a great thing to, Citco, we appreciate the $10,000. We can't do the kind of things that we do without the additional kind of fundraising that gets happen, because there's just not, we don't want to tax people to be able to do everything that needs done in our community. So thank you guys for stepping up. And we also, as we saw, now that the rains we know they aren't going to fill our aquifers. I don't know, anybody that's been on well, and I was in Naperville before it was on Lake Michigan water, when you would take a shower and you couldn't rinse because the water pressure was so low that it just wasn't available. And so this is a real serious problem for Joliet and the local folks that are on this aquifer. So hopefully we can come to some resolutions and make sure that these guys are taken care of. And we had Plainfield, with their track team doing so well. I do want to make mention that Neuqua Valley High School won track state this year without a single first place. Without a single first place. All these guys were coming in second place and third. So it shows, and I think when I take a look at the work that we've been doing here, nobody is trying to outdo the other. We're just doing our job. And when I look at what it takes to make a team come in first, I think that not only am I seeing that within our Neuqua, but I see that within our county board here with the folks on both sides of the aisle doing a lot of hard work to make things happen. So I want to thank all our county board members and the work that you all have done throughout this month. And enjoy the summer. Don't forget, Pitbull will be in Naperville at Ribfest, so come up and see Pitbull and all the other bands that we have up at Ribfest in Naperville over the 4th of July weekend. Have a great time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next up, Minority Leader, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Executive. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if I can top the Pitbull, but I do know that on behalf of this legislative body, all 26 of us cannot thank our partner Citco enough for the $10,000 contribution to CAC. Mr. Glasgow can tell you how far, and Lisa, I know she left, that will go to help that agency. So on behalf, I just want to say thank you as well for having great partners like SITCO in Will County. Also want to add that the Public Works and Transportation Committee, Mr. Gould, I so many times are not able to be there because there's simultaneous committees going on across the hall. But on today, we voted on several resolutions in District 8 and in District 12. And you all heard from Denise Winfrey how important it is for me to keep the roads smooth for her. And Mr. Weigel, I'm sure it's important to keep the roads smooth in District 12 for Mr. Tuminella. You know that was coming, Ray. But thank you so much for all of the attention that's given to District 8. We certainly appreciate that. And then lastly, before we meet again, we would have passed our Independence Day that we call 4th of July. Certainly want to wish you, Mr. Executive, and all of the staff and all the county board and your family a very happy Independence. As Chuck has said, a lot of us, the county board members, you have done a lot of hard work, and I know vacations coming up that are well deserved. So may I say a happy Independence Day, Nancy, to all of you, to all of your family, and have a wonderful vacation until we meet again. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Next up, our speaker, Mr. Mustis.
Well, happy summer, everyone. It came in with a splash, huh? Yeah. So I just want to thank once again the board, the staff members for continuing to bring the people's agenda forward, getting people work done, and trying to make this a better place. And everyone have a great 4th of July, and be safe. Don't be blowing fireworks off in your front yard. Go to the fireworks shows, and everyone have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no executive session, so this board will stand at recess until Thursday, July 19th at 9:30 a.m. Oh, well, I got one more announcement.
Yeah, now it's over.
See, that one of our county elected officials is having a birthday by chance that. All board members are invited downstairs for food and some kind of drink for Duffy's 40th birthday. 40.